Good morning. My name is Mike Meixler. I live in Concho, Arizona, and this is my submission for the Permaculture Design course with Jeff Lawton. First, I'd like to orient you to where we are in the country. We are in the United States. We are in the state of Arizona, which is in the southwest. We have the state of New Mexico to our east and California to our west. If you look at the state of Arizona, the big populated area is Phoenix, which is in the central south of the state. We are in the eastern part of the state, about an hour from New Mexico. To the north of us, we have some of the Zuni Indian Reservation, about 10 miles north of Petrified Forest, and then we have the Hopi and Navajo Reservation. To the south of where we live, there's an area called the Mogollon Rim, which is a great ponderosa pine forest. And then down in Phoenix and Tucson, you have deserts. People think Arizona is several million acres of kitty litter. It's not. Where we live, we're up at 6,000 feet. It's a high desert, and we get snow in the winter. The first frost here is typically around October 5th. This property design is at a latitude of 34.4753 north and 109.6058 west. We are about as far south as Georgia. So one of the interesting things about this property is, even though it's cold because of the high elevation, cold high desert, we don't have the long daylight like they have up north in the north part of the country. But in the winter, our days are longer, which this is a good climate for greenhouse production. To look at this property specifically that we did the design on, the property is approximately 100 acres. This is north, this is south, west over here, and east. The property had 2 old farmhouses. So let me just talk you through my design, and once we talk through it, then we'll actually go look at the design put into implementation. This property on the west side has a hilltop, which is at an elevation of 6,167 feet. The low point is 6,062 feet, so we have about 105 feet of fall from this hilltop all the way down to this valley. One of the fortunate things I was able to do with my permaculture design is I had a neighbor who had some laser equipment, and we were able to set up that GPS laser on the back of a quad, drive around the whole farm, and actually make an elevation contour map. If you remember from the PDC design course with a contour map, when the lines are really close together, that shows a very steep slope. So here's the hilltop, and we'll go out there and take a look, and then coming down to the valley, the contour lines are further apart, and so the slope is more gentle here. The challenges of a design of this property is the property, there's a state highway to the south. This area only gets about 11 inches of precipitation a year. More than half of that come in during what's called the monsoon season, which is July, August, September. And as the ground gets saturated, there's huge runoff in floodwaters. And this low part of the property happens to sit across a state highway where the state had put in 2 culverts. And so the problem that had developed over many years was there was 6 to 10 foot erosion gullies on this southwest corner, and basically this whole part of the farm was not usable because of those erosion gullies. The other interesting things about this farm is it has heavy clay soil, very low in organic matter, somewhere between 1 and 2%, an alkaline pH which would be typical of the high desert, and not much precipitation. The other challenges are there's a spring drying desiccating winds that come out continually from the southwest. Some of the advantages we had with this piece of property that were available for permaculture design were that the farm had water shares from an old water system that was built by settlers here in the 1800s. They found a spring about 8 miles up the road. The original settlers built a dam, and that spring fills basically a small lake all winter. And then in the summer, that water is available for irrigation for a handful of small ranches and farms down here in this valley. The other unfair advantage we have is we have the Coconino Aquifer beneath us, which you can drill a well up to maybe 100 feet, you hit water. And by setting a well and pump somewhere between 100 and 300 feet, you're in a huge aquifer. The property actually has a well pretty central that produces about 300 gallons a minute. This area is kind of interesting. This is a perfect example of environmental devastation due to overgrazing. In the 1800s, this is where the sheep and cattle wars were. There were droughts in Texas, and hundreds of thousands of cattle were moved over here by rail. And if you read the stories about the old cattle wars, is a lot of times, you know, the ranchers would intentionally overgraze an area, not only to get the feed for their animals, but to leave nothing for their competitors. So around us is pretty dry, high desert, where the topsoil was blown away, and some of the creeks and streams in this area were eventually just plugged up. The cattle, you know, kind of ate the cottonwoods and the willows, which were native and stabilizing the stream banks, and caused a lot of erosion problems. So with this permaculture design, we wanted to take advantages of the resources that we had. We wanted to take advantage of the 4 or 5 irrigations that we have from the irrigation system, because that's low cost water. We did not want to use the well. We wanted to use the well as sparing as possible because of the electricity, the pumping costs. And then we had this free resource of the monsoon floods that we wanted to take advantage of. So the first part of the permaculture design involved some major earthworks, and that involved healing up this erosion gully that was created from these monsoon floods. Part of permaculture design, we wanted to turn a problem into the solution, or turn this devastation into something to our advantage. And as we got looking at this, we discovered that these culverts, because they were on a low spot in the highway, were actually catching the water from a couple thousand acre watershed above that. And it was very powerful. Looking at this from a permaculture perspective, you know, ideally we would have wanted to set like this mainframe swale on the key line where the contour goes from convex to concave. But in this case we had a trade-off because we had this massive water source that was coming in. So we chose to put this mainframe swale here. I would have liked to have it higher up on the property to hold that water higher and then gravity feed it to water the rest of the farm. But we put it there because it was still high enough to use, and then we could also capture all the runoff from the road. So the main earthwork feature we have on the west side of the farm is we put in a dam to hold, and a pond to hold this rush of water. This dam was keyed in with a track hoe and a large front end loader. And then at the edge of the dam we put a spillway and a swale that goes the whole 100 acres all the way to the back. And this is a large pond with drain pipe that we can use this water, and the drain pipe comes underground to this rough pasture, and we can hold this water when it comes in July, August when we don't need it, hold that there through the winter, and then get an early irrigation on this pasture with free water from the runoff. So as this pond fills up with the monsoons, the water runs back here, just have a little bit of fall, have a road here just to the east of that ditch. It fills the large water holding reservoir, and then we have a spillway. When this reservoir fills, the swale continues around. This swale has a soft bank and no road, and then we have a level spillway here at the back, which it fills a pond here at the back of the property, and then can fill this swale, which is about the middle of the property. This swale, which is at the center of the property, actually goes from behind the two houses and centrally splits the property. And the reason why we selected this area for the secondary swale was that these fields up here are irrigated by the well and by the irrigation shares, and it's a flood irrigated field, so by the time the water got done irrigating these fields, it was being wasted and channelized off the property. So this secondary swale here about dead center of the property actually recaptures that tailwater, so none of it's wasted. And then what the plan here called for was a strip about 20 yards wide for a windbreak food forest that is watered by irrigation tailwater. So this feature right here, the secondary swale, is a food forest that will provide, biological diversity, lots of food, and also a windbreak for the pastures, an edible windbreak. And we've got trees planted on both sides of the swale. Just to orient you to a few other of the features with the design plan, you can take note of the coffee stains. Those are not a permaculture design feature, but they do show you that this plan has been worked pretty hard because there has been quite a bit of coffee spilled on the map. Over here on the west side, this is a swale system with holding tanks or ponds on each side. This will be a tree growing system with also some fish. On the far east side, next to the first farmhouse, there is a pond that was there originally from the original owners. This pond is just filled seasonally with irrigation water. Part of the plan is we put a pipe at the bottom of this pond, and the plan is to keep ducks here because we want some nutrients and fertility to run downhill to the swale system, swale orchard system that was designed behind the house. In zone 1, we designed some gardens with some grow boxes and some herb spirals, also an orchard. And then to the rear of the house, we designed in a gray water harvesting system where the water is filtered through rock and volcanic cinder, and then it overflows into a series of swales that are planted to perennials and some trees. In the second house, this was an old actually an old barn that was built into a house. And I'm really excited to tell you about the permaculture principles we use to retrofit this house to make it a passive solar. This house is also designed with a swale system and orchard in the backyard, a greenhouse right here in zone 1, and a southern exposed Arizona or sunroom to passively heat and cool the house. Also in zone 1 we have a small milk cow pasture or pastured poultry pasture that can be run into the pastures that go from zone 1 to zone 2. With the fill from our big Earthworks project, we put in some we had to do something with the fill, so we put large raised beds with that topsoil to be later used in gardens or to start a tree nursery, an idea I got, I think, from one of Sepp Holzer's books, was to buy wholesale trees at the very end of the season, when you can buy them cheap, and then plant them in these raised beds, and have your own outdoor tree nursery. One of the exciting things that I learned from Jeff in this latest permaculture design course is that shallow marine and water are great soil growing systems. So one of the new additions to this plan is we designed a swale system, basically in zone 1 behind the home, zone 1 into zone 2, and then these swales overflow with spillways one after the other into a pond. I designed this pond with a flat, easy area for a loader to get in, because this is the low point on the property down here. We got nutrient flow from irrigation and swales running down the hill, but we designed this so we can muck out, every few years the nice topsoil, and then spread them in the garden and swale areas, right to the back of the house. Now that we've looked at my permaculture design on paper, now
let's look at the stars.